Hello, everyone. My name is Carly Ann Burkett. I am a reference archivist here at the Alabama Department of Archives and History, and I'm going to be speaking to you today about early records in Alabama, specifically early land records. But before we get started, I do just want to have an announcement. The Food for Thought here at ADAH, our next one will be next Thursday at noon, and it's going to be virtual. So we're not going to have it in the building. It's going to be virtual. This one's going to be on Native American families. So I hope that y'all will join us for that next Thursday. So let's get started. We are going to be covering early land records in Alabama. And we'll move on to our first slide. So let's talk first about methods of initial distribution of land in Alabama. So we became a state in 1819. But there were some people here before that, but there weren't a lot. But we're going to kind of talk about that pre-statehood and then early statehood and kind of how people got here. So we're going to focus on the early land that would have been here by settlers. So the three main ways that you would have gotten land at this time period are through colonial land grants, land patents, and military bounty land warrants. And I've got a map up here. I like to use maps when I'm doing research because this map is great. It has the different kind of land purchases and land acquisitions in the United States, which can be really important when you're doing family history or just in general land research. You need to know when land was acquired and who it was owned by at a certain time. In Alabama, we had 4 countries that have governed over us: the United States, the Confederacy, the French, Spanish, and British. That's actually 5. So you have to also keep that into context of who would have been in charge at a certain time period. That'll tell you where you need to look for certain records. So we're going to move on. Land ownership in America. This is also important to understand. So private land ownership is a concept that we are all familiar with today, but it was a new concept for these settlers that were coming to the U.S. A lot of these settlers came from countries like Scotland, England, Ireland, France, Germany, places like that, where they were living on a feudal land system. Privately owning your own property was not something that the average person would have been familiar with. So this ability to own your own property was very attractive to settlers in these new colonies. And that was a big part of why a lot of them chose to come here. Land grants were initially given to settlers by the Crown or colonial governments. So that's also something to think about. So before you start looking for land that may have been given to your ancestor by the U.S., you may want to think about, well, if they were here before the United States was established, who would have been the government that would have given it to them? Later, after these land grants by the Crown or the colonial government kind of faded, you had land sales of public land. And this is where the United States, as a newly formed country, they had acquired all of this land, and they did a really good job of kind of dividing it up so that they could sell it for funding. And this is how they raised money, but also populated the West, which in the early 1800s, Alabama would have been the West. So let's talk about colonial land grants. These are distributions of land in the colonies, and they were granted by the Crown or colonial governments. So there were some requirements for getting these. These could be, you would have to be able to pay for the land. You may have to have military service. You may have to bring an immigrant to the colony, maybe like an indentured servant or a family member, something like that. You also would have probably had to live on the land and make improvements to it. And then there also would have been meeting some other requirements that could have been specified by the state or colony. So a lot of these grants or patents or warrants, they had stipulations. So this wasn't necessarily where you just went and signed up for something and they gave you X amount of acres. You would have to kind of follow some guidelines. And these were the common ones for the colonial land grants. It was a 4-step process. You would first petition for the land, and then a warrant would be issued for the land, and then the patent or grant would give title to the patentee. Entry into the records finalized the transaction, and then it was common for people to kind of fill out of this process. As you can see, it's a 4-step process. There are a lot of different hoops you'd have to jump through. So a lot of people did fall out of this process. They may not have been able to, finish the payments. They may have passed away. They may have wanted to move elsewhere. So there are a lot of different reasons why, but a lot of people did not fail the process. But this does not mean that you may not find records that show them at least making some of those steps. Also, claims were sometimes abandoned or they were sold. So you may have gotten your claim or started it, and then you sold it off to someone else who would then complete it. So now let's talk about Alabama. As I talked about earlier, how Alabama has been under different governments, more than just the U.S. You have French rule from 1702 to 1763, and then the British ruled in Alabama from 1763 to 1783, and then finally the Spanish from 1783 to 1810, and after that, it's the U.S. Now, that doesn't mean that these countries ruled over all of Alabama as we look at it today, but they did roll over parts of it. But it is important to look at these to know, okay, if I'm looking for land from the 1750s, I probably need to look under French colonial things. So that, this is a good guideline. So some of the sources for colonial land grants. So if you're looking for colonial land grants, that would be like French colonial, Spanish, or British. Some of the sources that we have here at the archives are this example, the St. Stephen's Land Office Register and Case Files of Private Land Claims. These are records from 1786 to 1846. They contain case files of land grants made by the French, English, and Spanish governments, and it describes the land in some detail. Sometimes it'll include drawings, and sometimes it'll have personal information regarding the claimant. So maybe their neighboring landowners, which could be really helpful. So if you were going to come in to look for colonial land records, this is one of the collections that I would suggest you look for first. The St. Stephen's Land Office and Case Files of Private Land Grants. The St. Stephen's Land Office, that just means that each of these places are going to have a land office, kind of a place where you would go and file your claims. St. Stephen's is the location of that land office. So here's an example of a private land claim case file. You can kind of see what it looks like. This was filed by a Mr. Motley, and this lot was granted to him by the Spanish government. This is actually located on Government Street in Mobile, Alabama, and this claim is dated 1803. You'll find that most of these types of colonial land grants are going to be in that Mobile, Baldwin County, Washington County, that kind of region of our state. It's not every single one of them, but that's going to be where most of them are, because that's where really the population of present-day Alabama was in that early time period. The rest of the state was not really inhabited by white settlers as much yet. So, all right. So next we're going to talk about the public land survey system. This is probably one that most of you are more familiar with, because this is the land patent system. But it's still important to kind of understand, and it still works for early land records. So the public land survey system was created by the Land Ordinance of 1785. In 1803, the Louisiana Purchase doubled the size of the U.S., and Alabama was part of that. The survey system used to subdivide and describe land that was acquired by the U.S. And they had to do that because they had just received a massive land size Louisiana Purchase. So all federally owned land subdivided by rectangular systems of surveys. So what they did was quite clever. They took this land, this huge portion of land they had, and they divided it and subdivided it into these perfect little rectangular square systems so that they could very easily have it divvied up and ready to give to people in land patent form. So this included major portions of 30 southern and western states. So you think about that, that is a huge chunk of our country as a whole. An important thing to note, this does not include the 13 original colonies. The 13 original colonies and West Virginia, Texas, and a few more are under a totally different thing. They're under what is called a meets and bounds system. So the Public Land Survey, land is divided into 6-mile square townships and ranges. Townships and ranges are then divided further into 36 1-mile square sections, and each section contains 640 acres. Sections can be divided even further into smaller quarter sections. I mean, they can go even farther than that. Section 16, and all of these are set aside for schools, so oftentimes you won't necessarily see people that are living in the Section 16. Usually that one is blank. Patent, the patent gives legal land description, and it also can be used to plot the location on county highway maps. There are different resources out there that can help you do that. The Bureau of Land Management's a great one, so is History Geo. And there's also some really great family map books that will help you do that as well. Subsequent transfers, sales of land are recorded in deed and estate records at the county level. So that's also an important distinction to know. The land patent, which is part of the Public Land Survey System, is the very first piece of paper that is attached to that piece of property. And then once that piece of property is then sold or given or subdivided in whatever way onto the next person, then it becomes a deed. So a deed is the child of one of these, essentially. So this is what they look like. This is kind of what those rectangles look like. As you can see, you can kind of see each. This is section 14. And then you can see where it's highlighted here in this township and range map. And many of you have probably seen these, but I think it's important to understand them so that they can best help you in the best way. Okay, so here we go. Public land states, they're listed here for you. You can see Alabama is listed there, as of many others, and then states with no public lands, the original 13 colonies, and then Texas and West Virginia, and a couple others. So Kentucky, Hawaii, Maine, Tennessee, Texas, Vermont. Those are, so it's always important to know that distinction. So if the place you're looking for was an original 13 colony, this public land survey system is not going to be helpful to you. You're going to have to go a different route. But if you do fall into the category of some of those later states, this would be a great place for you to look. So we're going to go a little bit deeper into land patents here. So a land patent is the original purchase of land from the federal government. And I kind of mentioned that earlier. I'm just going to reiterate that. County tract books can be used to identify the original purchaser, patent number, and others owning land in the same area. Patents are available at the Bureau of Land Management's website, and they're free there as well. And patents give the legal land description that you can then use to plot it out on a county map, so you can see exactly where that land was. And the Bureau of Land Management's website will assist you in actually doing that for you. But then there are other things as well, resources like History Geo, that will do a little bit better job of that. So land patents, tract books, field notes are all available on the Secretary of State's website. you can find them all there. It can be a little, it's not as user friendly as I often hope it would be, but if you do need help, you can always call us and ask, and we'll be able to assist you. But they are all available for free online. Subsequent land transfers that are recorded after the land patent, as I stated previously, such as in deed, probate, or estate case files, are not land patents. They come after. So this is an example of what that Bureau of Land Management's website will show you as far as the land patent. So this is actually one of my own ancestor, John Burkett in Butler County, where I grew up. So my family has been in that county for quite some time. But this is his land patent. He got about 79 acres, and you can see where his township and range box is, and then his patent is in that little darker orange box there. But this is what it looks like, and then you can click on up at the top where it says patent image. If you clicked on that, it would actually show you his actual original patent, and that this is what one looks like. This is not John Burkett's, but this is a man named Alexander Fates, and so this is what that image would look like with that patent. You would see it would give you the township and range and the section and a date. And since these people did go through such a process when they would apply for these, if you see one that's dated 1820 or with my ancestors 1850, that's when they actually received and completed their process. So that means that they had been paying for that property and or living on that property and making improvements or going through whatever steps they had to for quite some time. So they probably were there prior to that year, but that can be quite tricky to prove. But that's just something to know. So next, let's talk about U.S. military bounty land warrants. This is something that people have a lot of questions about. They were encouraged, used to encourage people to serve in the military. And they also were a great avenue to entice soldiers to stay in the service. It was a benefit. So these are grants of free land for military service between 1775 and 1885. So if you were to serve in the military, you would get some free acreage, so you wouldn't have to pay for it. And so I've got the wars here that this applies for. So the Revolutionary War, War of 1812, Indian Wars, Mexican War. And we're only going to kind of cover the early stuff, so pre-1850. Veterans could apply for these warrants, and then if granted, the warrant was then used to apply for a land patent, which would then grant ownership of land. And then warrants could be transferred and sold. So if you did receive one and then you wanted to maybe give it to someone else or upon your death or while you were living or sell it, you could do so. So surviving family members were also eligible to apply for a warrant. So maybe, widows or sons, things of that nature. How much acreage you got was totally designated on the rank that you achieved. So that's also how they decided how much land to give someone. So, okay, so here's an example of a military bounty land warrant. This is from the Sparta Land Office record. This is for a man named Bertram Hoole, and he is from Houston County, Georgia, and he served in the Greek War, and his warrant was dated for 1853. And this one is actually not listed on the Bureau of Land Management's website for whatever reason, but this is actually a warrant for Georgia, not for Alabama. But I just wanted to point out this man is from Georgia. And then if you look closely, it'll have his name, Bertram Poole of Houston, Georgia, so you know where he's from. And then if you see that he's applying, it tells you he's applying for a patent at the Land Office of Sparta, Alabama. He's going to get 40 acres. So you could then use that number of how many acres he got to kind of just figure out what his rank was. And then you could go further than that and figure out maybe where this patent was going to be. So the U.S. land offices in Alabama, I've listed them here. The reason why they're important is that there were different numbers of them. These all didn't exist at the same time. Some of these overlap in times that they exist, but not all of these existed at the same time. This is just all of them that existed ever. So the reason why these are important is because a lot of people get confused and they see a land patent and it might say the Greenville Land Office, and somebody will automatically think that, oh, that means my ancestor must have been in Greenville, Alabama. Well, that's not necessarily the case. So your land office, you would just go to the one that was closest to you. But that didn't mean that necessarily if you went to the Tuscaloosa land office, didn't mean that you were in Tuscaloosa. And the earlier ones, as far as the early statehood, there were fewer land offices, so they were covering much more ground. So you just kind of have to note that you're going to be, if it's the Montevallo one, it's going to kind of be in that central Birmingham area in between Birmingham and Montgomery, but it may not necessarily be in the city of Montevallo. And there's plenty of maps out there that are helpful if you do get into that spot where you're unsure. So here I'm going to show some catalog entries. So if you were to come here to the archives and you wanted to do some searching for maybe some of those colonial private land claims, or you wanted to look up kind of some of those step-by-step processes of getting land warrants and that we have for the land offices or through the Secretary of State's website, some of the things that we have here, I wanted to kind of show you what it would look like if you were to do a search. So this is a screenshot that I took where I personally did a search just for Alabama Land Office and our catalog, and this were the first 6 results, but there's over 167 record collections. So there's so many of these. So we have so much stuff that could be helpful out there to anyone looking for these early land records. There are numerous records in each series, and these are all available here in our research room. So if you wanted to come and look at any of these, you could come in and we would assist you, but you can see this is just the top one is Alabama Office of Secretary of State Land Divisions and Land Records from 1800 to 1983. You can kind of see there's receivers, registers, or certificates, receivers monthly account book. There's so many different types that can be useful. So let's talk about land office registers certificates. So these are presented to purchasers to confirm a sale. And they include the name of the purchaser, the county of residence, land location, number of acres, the price, schedule, and dates of payments. Some records include surveys of land and affidavits from other people. This is an example of one. This is for a person named Alexander Faith. This is for Section 17 of Township 8 and Range 3. And this is from it's 1812, and it was paid in full and completed in 1817. So that kind of shows you that there can be a 5-year gap. So it usually took some time to kind of actually get your hands on this property. And this is a more zoomed in, so you can see where it took 5 years to pay in full $72. So Land Office Register of Transfers. These are just examples of collections that we have here that you can use. So these contain copies of statements transferring a tract of land from one individual to another. These are entries, identify the seller's, buyer, and original receipt number and location of land, and they're helpful in tracing ownership of land. So this would be an example of when someone was applying for one of these types of records that we're talking about, and they kind of pause on the process and they transfer it to someone else, and that person completes the process. So here's an example. This is a transfer of land recorded in a register. And this is from a John Harrell to a John Jaggers of Washington County, Alabama. And this is for the southwest quarter of Section 21, Township South 9, and Range 2 West. And this is dated in February of 1819. So the year that we became a state, but we are not quite a state yet. We became one in December, and this is February. So this is right before statehood. So if you were trying to research one of these men, this is a great record to find because it'll tell you where these men were in February of 1819, pre-statehood. So county tract books. These are official records of each parcel of public land that was transferred to private ownership. They are originally maintained by the federal government from 1820 to 1908. These books include who obtained the land, a physical description of the land, and where the land is located. This includes types of transactions, cash, credit, homesteads, patents, mineral timber rights, Indian allotments, internal improvements, and military bounty land warrants. So it's a lot possible there. So another record I want to talk about are the American States Papers from 1789 to 1837. And their public land and claims. This is a resource that we have here in the archives. They are books, but you can find these many other places. So, but this is something that we also have. So if you're not finding what you're looking for in our records, this is a great resource to look for early records. This is a compilation of congressional records. They are a great source for genealogical information and land claims. They give you ages, names of claimants, location of claimants, place of residence, names of wives, children, sometimes other relatives. They also include land claims and transactions for public domain lands, so military bounty land and veteran relief claims, claims by refugees, agreements with Indian nations, settlements of private land claims on public domain lands acquired from foreign governments. And so the series, so Series 8 concentrates on public lands, and Series 9 concentrates on claims. So these are always important because they cover more than just Alabama. So state claims. All Alabama claims prior to 1817 are included under Mississippi, and that's because we did not become a territory until 1817. So if you're looking for things prior to that territory year, it could actually physically be in Mississippi sometimes. Records from the Vine and Olive Colony settlers, claims of colonial French, British, and Spanish land grants in the Gulf states settled prior to 1810 are found under the territory of Louisiana. So you can go even farther, and sometimes, some of our things could be there. Settlements of the Georgia Yazoo land claims are also included because under the Georgia Yazoo land claim, they were actually selling land that was here in Alabama. Petitions for bounty land by Revolutionary War soldiers of Virginia. Some of those can be found here in Alabama, in present-day Alabama, not found here at the archives. Choctaw land claims under the Treaty of Dancing Rabbit Creek and Creek and Cherokee reserves after the settlement of the war. So this is one of the last ones we're going to talk about. So the Territorial Papers of the United States are a great resource. Volume 5 and 6, The Territory of Mississippi, from 1798 to 1817, and then Volume 8, or I'm sorry, that's not 8, that's 18, The Territory of Alabama, 1817 to 1819. So these can be great as well if you're looking for information on Alabama records. The official records of the territories are here, and there are records from the archives of the Department of State, Treasury, War, Interior, and Post Office, House and Senate files, and the Library of Congress. So that's going to wrap up our presentation today. And if any of you have any other questions, please put them in the chat box, and I'll be happy to answer to the best of my ability. Please come visit us here at the in the research room. Our hours are Tuesday to Saturday, 8:30 to 4:30. We'd love to have you. Okay, I'm looking through some questions to see what we've got here. So I see that we have a question here. Where do you find the land patent for the original Americans in Alabama, Greene County? So you could find that at the Bureau of Land Management's website. You could put in Greene County, Alabama, and you could type a particular name. You could search for a name there, or you could just put that in and see everybody that's listed. Okay, let's see. We have another question here. My great-grandfather purchased 300 plus acres in Eclectic, Alabama. What's the procedure for locating his records? So if he purchased that 300 plus acres from another person, you would need to look at deed records. So you would need to go to, I think Eclectic is in Elmore County. I could be wrong, but I think it's in Elmore County. You would need to go to the Elmore County courthouse and look through their deed records. If he purchased it through a land patent, you should be able to go to the Bureau of Land Management's website and search there for his name in whatever county, and it should come up that he purchased some property there. Okay. There's another question here. Records are available online. Completely means which ones you're looking for. As far as land records, there are tract books. There are also records of that nature, those county tract books available at the Secretary of State's website. Those are online and free. Land patents are online and free at the Bureau of Land Management's website. A lot of those U.S. Land Office books, you actually would have to come in to see those here. Okay. I'm not seeing any other questions, but if anyone else has any other ones, I'll be happy to answer them. Will this live be recorded for later viewing? I believe so. They should go up on our YouTube channel. It may take a couple of days, but it should be up there for viewing later. All right. Any other questions? Thank y'all so much, and I hope that y'all enjoyed it. I know our weekend, what are our weekend hours? I saw that one. It's hard to see all of the questions, so I'm sorry if I'm missing anybody's, but the weekend hours, 8:30 to 4:30. So we're not open on state holidays. So this coming Monday, we're going to be closed for Martin Luther King, his birthday. So we're not open that day. The research room is not open on Mondays anyway, but the building will not be open at all on Monday. But the research room is open Tuesday through Saturday, 8:30 to 4:30. All right. Okay.